Hi, good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. It's cold again, which is kind of comforting, I guess. So thanks for coming out. I'm Kay Matchalot, the producing director at Max, and we're storytellers, creative technologists, performers, and scientists collaborate to make work that expands live performance with science and technology. So tonight is our third and final of our MAXforum series this fall, and this is where we bring our artists from our laboratory, Max Machina, together, and we bring them with collaborators and scientists and like-minded creatives to think about some of the more challenging questions that come up in the work. So tonight, I'm thrilled that we have these three people coming together. It's really wonderful for me that these three particular people are here tonight. And first I will talk about Modesto Flaco Jimenez. He is a Dominican-born Bushwick-based multi-hyphenate artist. He is a poet, a playwright, an educator, an actor, a producer, and director. He's definitely a polymath. His art addresses the political changes and social changes affecting the Latin American community in Bushwick. His art making really shifts thinking, and his play Taxilandia, which took you on a ride through Bushwick, brought the past, present, and future of Bushwick alive in the most extraordinary way. And it has now been opened in San Diego, so it's expanding minds in San Diego right now, and it's going to be in other American cities, so stay tuned for that. It's a wonderful experience. If you get it in any city, it will be extraordinary. He is the founder of and the artistic director of Oye Group. We are very grateful to have him as a Max Machina artist this year, where he's expanding his piece Mercedes, and with through science and technology to be able to reach more and deeper into his community. And talking with him will be Dr. Nikki Clayton, who is on our board of advisors, and she's a professor of comparative cognition in the Department of Psychology at the University of Cambridge. She's a fellow at the Royal Society. They have those kinds of things in England. And her expertise lies in the contemporary study of comparative cognition. We are lucky to have her in New York briefly. She will return to the UK and Europe to receive 2 prizes next week, one the Tinbergen Prize and the other the Association of Animal Behavior Medal. She says she's never had a medal before, so she'll be able to wear it on her dress or something. Nikki's also the first scientist in residence at Rambert, formerly the Rambert Dance Company, a position she's held for 11 years. She collaborates with Mark Baldwin, the founder, on new choreographic works inspired by science, including the Laurence Olivier winning The Comedy of Change. She and Flaco have been riffing together on Zoom, and I've been lucky enough to be part of those conversations. And it's about memory. Well, you'll see. You'll find out. I believe me, they won't stop talking. Anyway, and to help guide this conversation is Adora Udo, another board of advisor from a member of our board of advisors, and she's an award-winning storyteller and producer. Currently, she is vice president of programming and operations at PBS. The genres go across the board: news, current affairs, film series, web series, and podcasts. And Adora also works across platforms of radio, movies, video, podcast, virtual, and augmented reality. So, and she has contents that premiered at Sundance, Tribeca, and on Google. So she was a broadcast journalist, correspondent, and anchor, winning many awards, including the Alfred I. DuPont Award for her reporting about Hurricane Katrina. So she's also a teacher at ITP and at NYU, a place we often work with people from there and about there. So thank you. And so I want to thank tonight, it's our third and last, so I want to thank our partners, New Inc., ONX Studio, the Onassis Foundation, particularly Sensorium, John and Matthew, who have fantastic production support, and Vallejo Gardner from ONX Onyx, who keeps this place lit and bright and really interesting. And thanks for having us. And finally, thanks to our Max board and our donors, specifically tonight to Diane Max, who's made the meeting of these minds possible. And one announcement, there will be a reception afterwards. Join us for wine and a bite. And also our applications open to our Max Machina laboratory. Actually, I think they just went live on our website, so check that out if you're interested. So thanks for coming, and I hope I see you in the spring at some of our workshops. And they'll come up.
Hello. I wish we could sort of form a talking circle, and I could see you guys. These bright lights are bright. Hi, I'm Adora. This is Flaco, and this is Dr. Nikki. And I'm really excited to be here. And Kay was not wrong. I think the two of them should have their own show, and I think you'll see that. But even more than that, it doesn't happen very often, and I think there's a few people in here who could attest to this. But I've been thinking so much about the conversations I've had with them, about what I watched on Zoom, that I really don't have a plan tonight. So, because there's so much to cover, and their minds are so big and bright and creative, and the way they look at the world and the work that they're doing is really profoundly inspiring. So that sounds like a lot, but it's probably not even scratching the surface after you listen to both of them. So I just want to thank you before we start, because I think you've sort of changed my life in some ways in listening to the conversation. So today we're talking about that nexus of science and art, right? And if we think about it, the imagination has always propelled the evolution of humankind. Things can't be different until you can imagine maybe there is something different. And I think that's the nexus of where the two of you live. And I think there are a couple of words, a couple of descriptions that you each shared that have really stuck with me. And so I'd like to talk about you as human beings a little bit first, and then let's talk about storytelling and how you each approach it, and then let's talk about 3 dimensions and inner dimensions of how we tell stories and we integrate all of that thinking. But Dr. Nikki, from wanting to be a bird, to becoming a dancer, to scientist, talk to us about that.
Well, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a bird, think like a bird, and move like a bird. So I've always wanted to fly, and I don't mean on an aeroplane. They're handy tools, but I meant to literally get across the room. And it was my love of movement that led me to do ballet like many young children do, and then later to get into contemporary dance and jazz. And then now I also perform and teach Cuban salsa and Argentine tango. And I suppose it was my love of birds that also got me into science, because I didn't just want to know about how they move, which is the choreographic dancer bit, but I also wanted to know about how they think. And I realised that to do that, I would need to do some science, and particularly to focus on zoology, or more specifically ornithology, and also psychology, so that I had the right kind of thinking tools to be able to find ways to ask them about what they can remember, whether they can imagine the future and importantly plan for it, and whether they can think not only about other times but also other minds.
Flaco, you talked about how there's been an evolution in your practice from wanting to perform to wanting to engage with community. Can you talk about that?
Can y'all hear me? I just think like after the pandemic, I had a reality check. Like during the pandemic, I created a piece called Taxilandia that Kay was talking about that was originally created to be in a car. And I was trying to sell it for like 5 years, pitch it, workshops, everything, trying to do everything and self-invest and all of that. And like nobody wanted it. It was like, no, create the stage show. And then I created a small version of like, look, no, this is what it would look like in the car. But I put it up on stage and then people started gravitating to that. And then I ended up creating the stage version because that's what people wanted. So like a big investment to a stage situation that then the pandemic happened. And then everybody wanted the car show. And I was like, this is what I said all along. And then I started like backtracking about all the other plays and all the other things and being like, oh shit. It's always what I've thought about. And it's always back to the block. And it's always like, how do I bring y'all, take y'all out of the stage? Because I keep filming my neighborhood and bringing it to y'all. Or filming this beautiful woman speaking to me and then bringing it to y'all. And like, let me just take it to the block. And let me first, if I need to do a stage play, before you get the stage play, how can we go to the block first? And not just that one.
But when you say go to the block, what does that mean?
So like, you know, like, have you go and actually engage in the community that the production is about. So like right now, Mercedes is about dementia, mental illness, my grandmother, personal, but also I know that that would be at the end. So how do I make sure that I activate to put on some tools and support that I was able to use while I was going through caregiving for her for like the 5 years that I did that to keep my art alive. So how do I pass those tools down to people before I even give people my stage play? So how do I activate and go to the community? And like, yo, seniors, y'all ain't got dementia yet. So here's coloring books, and here's this, and here's that, and here's that activates your minds to do this, do this, do that, keep it flowing. Because y'all just at home, and it's, you need to keep it moving. And like, how do I tell that to the caregiver and to, right? And all that, creating workshops, but first creating a story that people could come in and digest, not traumatize them by it. And like creating those different, this is why I'm here, because I don't know how to create PR, but I'm trying to figure out the new way of like the person that can't leave home anymore because they have to stay there.
But let's get back to the
Oh,
story
sorry.
because I want
Stop
to
me.
no, I want to talk to both of you about what story has meant. So is it cathartic for you then, this idea of taking a lived experience and extending it or mirroring it back?
I'm just realizing that we all go through this shit and like we just don't talk about it. So how do I?
But you're turning it into art in the same way that you're talking about motion and dance, right? This idea of wanting to understand beyond the mechanics of the bird flying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what the bird is thinking, what that community is like, what that relationship is between the bird and the wind and all of the other elements, right? I mean, there's a contextual element.
Yeah, and of course I do also work with human beings, particularly children and adult humans, and also with cephalopods, which are the cuttlefish, octopus and squid. And I suppose the bit for me that really interesting nexus is really two things. One is how you marry thinking with and without words. So obviously the cuttlefish and the crows are thinking without words. You know, we can argue about
Are they
what-
actually thinking? Do we
Well,
know that?
Yes, we do. And mental
gotta see
time
the video.
travel.
You gotta see the video.
Yeah, mental time travel, the ability to remember the past and imagine the future is probably the strongest scientific evidence for thinking.
Okay, you
Yeah.
know you have to stop there and tell us a little bit about that. What
Yes.
is mental time travel?
So mental time travel is the ability to be able to travel back in the mind's eye to think about the past and travel forwards in the mind's eye to imagine the future. And when I first started this work, scientists assumed that humans were the only animals that could do that. And in fact, long before psychologists were thinking about mental time travel, artists, such as the poet Robbie Burns, wrote a beautiful lament, Ode to a Mouse, in which he describes how he feels so guilty because it's dusk and he's ploughed up a mouse's field and watches the mouse run away and realises that because he's destroyed his nest, that mouse will surely die. And then he turns to the mouse, and in the lament he says, "Still thou art blessed compared with me. The present only touches thee, but oh, I cast my eye on prospects drear, and forwards though I cannot see and fear." So for Robbie Burns, he'd already made that connection that somehow remembering the past and imagining the future are all part of the same process, rather than thinking of memory as just being a repository of facts about the world. And he assumed that mice can't do that. Now, obviously, Robbie Burns is sadly long gone, so I can hardly have a conversation with him now about, whether he thought the same applied of crows. But the work that we've done has now firmly established that these animals can do this. And I had two scientists who were very adamant that animals, other than human beings, because we are animals after all, we're not plants, we're animals, or fungi for that matter. But they argued at the very beginning.
Oh my God, respect that gangster shit she just dropped. Y'all over here quiet like she just dropped bars, bro. Oh Lord.
But I got them to switch sides. One has now popped his clogs and is no more, but he switched sides before he passed away, and the other one joined our club of merry men and ladies about 2 years ago now. We even wrote a paper together showing that the animals are capable of this. So I think that's a very strong example of thinking.
And so, Flacco, when you hear her talk about that, I mean, what are you reacting to, and what are you relating to around this idea of memory and time and space?
The moment when somebody that has like dementia is in a wheelchair, but then all of a sudden they get up, they go do the dishes, and you have to go and like stand by them because you're scared because you think they're gonna like stop, and then all of a sudden you do have to grab them because they forget. Right? So it's that moment that you're like, wait, but you couldn't walk 2 seconds ago, and all of a sudden now you're walking, but your brain, your body told you can walk right now, and then your brain shut off again, and let it be known that you can't move these limbs no more. So like those are things that I just saw. So I saw that happen. Oh, coño. So I saw that happen like in real time, and then I've heard other caregivers from the block, right? Like the other brothers that are doing it for their mothers and shit. Like, yeah, did yours get up and cook, bro? Mine was in bed for like a week, and then all of a sudden she got up and cooked. I'm like, yeah, nah, mine's did the wheelchair one. And like that's how I'm like, oh shit, so it's the memory is coño. The memory is there. There's a switch that just happens, turns off, and tells the rest of the body like, nah, we ain't fucking with each other for now. But then the body is still doing what it wants to do because it's already done it before. So it's like, oh wait, when I did this, but then once it stopped, it's all these things that I'm seeing that I just what?
Keep
I'm like,
no,
I don't
keep
know if you
going.
would-
No, I just want her to jump in.
Right.
Just keep
But
going.
to
So
me
this was what you
To
witnessed.
me was what like I was hearing from the community when I was engaging them, asking them like, I know your mom's ain't coming outside no more, so she going through this shit too?
Mm-hmm.
So what are you going through in at home? And like, oh shit, yeah, bro, she's doing this and this. I'm like, yo, you making sure you got Medicaid for yourself too, nigga? Like, so doing sharing tools that way, because I'm able to like talk to y'all.
So I think
Right,
there's
take
an
it back.
interesting distinction between body memory, or corporal memory, if you like, and what I'd call mental memory or cerebral memory, right? So the cerebral memories would be your experiences. So maybe later on tonight you think about what we've been talking about and you recall your experience of listening to it. Whereas the body memories or the corporal memories are the skills that you've acquired that your body can do. So as a dancer, pirouetting and spotting and chaîné turns would be examples. Or it could be something as simple as learning to drive a car. Once you've learnt how to drive, you don't think about how you need to shift gears or use the brake pedal or whatever. So we've explored quite a lot of that. And the thing about body memories is that by definition, the body has unconscious access to those memories. Whereas the problem with the corporal memories, the experiential memories, is you have to have conscious access. So people often talk about things like dementia and Alzheimer's disease as memory loss. But the memories aren't lost. They haven't gone anywhere. You know, there isn't a leaky hole at the bottom that they've seeped out of. It's that your memories are there, but in the absence of having conscious access to them, you can't get to them. And so Flacco and I explored, for example, the idea of doors and how you might have a door that opens, but most of the time it's locked. And if the door is locked and
For 5 minutes, it opens up and you remind yourself that, oh shit, I left that dish from 3 days ago. And then you get up and you're like, and then you don't see that dish and then it locks.
yeah.
So that moment to me is like, oh shit, so it's not gone. Having
Yeah.
that conversation and being like, oh, so I knew something was disconnecting, but I thought it was just gone fully. And like now understanding, having those conversations, being like, oh, there's a switch here. There's something
Isn't that
else.
like bizarre? Like, because we do in mainstream conversation. I'm not a medical professional, but this idea of an absence, right, as opposed to an absence of access. Like I've never heard that description of how someone can be in bed for a week and then get up and clean the house.
Yeah. And, you know, just thinking about how memory is such an integral part of our lives for most healthy individuals. You know, it's easy to think of it as, oh, well, memory's about the past. So, you know, if you have these problems, it's just the past that's gone. But it's not just the past, because the present has to be contextualized if it's to be believed. How do I know if I'm hungry or not? Well, if I've nothing to compare with when I felt full and when I felt hungry, how do I know? Especially if I can't even remember whether I had a meal recently. So those sorts of things, I think, are really interesting, that that memory pervades the whole of the body and the mind. You can think of it, we've been using the door analogy, you can think of it as the door to identity, because memories shape who we are, and who we are shapes what we choose to remember. Each and every one of us after tonight will have a slightly different memory of what we thought we experienced. And there's one little saying I'd just like to share with you all. You don't remember what happened. What you remember becomes what happened. So none of us have a highly accurate record of what is actually happening. It's subjective because our experience is subjective. But somehow we take ownership for what we've chosen to remember and assume that is what actually happened. And we just do that 24/7. It's what we naturally do. But of course, Flacco's wonderful grandmother
Yes.
and anyone else with dementia and Alzheimer's disease can't do that anymore. And of course, if you've got Parkinson's disease, you can't even have those memory movements in the same way, because it fundamentally affects your ability to move.
So let's talk about your mother and the houses. Let's just talk about houses a little bit more, and
Yeah.
about what that memory journey
Yeah.
was like.
So there was a moment that I realized that it wasn't the same person and something was off. Like there was like, I know this is my mother, but she's forgetting the seasoning that she always uses, and she makes intentionally a season that's green in this weird ass jar that we feel like is there forever for years, but that's the season she uses. And now the seasoning is not happening. Oh, that's weird to me, but I'm not gonna stress it. Wait, you're going to the Dominican Republic? Cool. She's going back to the motherland to like sign papers on a house that we got. And she was actually in the same house for 10 years in America, where all she did was go to her appointments and come back home. And go to her appointments and come back home. So the dementia never sped up because it was in this bubble. And then what happened by going to the Dominican Republic, it was a different world. So then her mind couldn't like fathom that new world, and it took her back to just those memories of that world and bringing back people to life from those moments when she was in that world. And the only way she came back would be through conversations of people here on this side, on their phone, until we could bring her back to America, to the constant that the mind was more focused on. Because the mind in DR already was just a kid mind. So it was this weird moment that's when we knew, oh shit, the actual, and then this is when you look through all the paperwork and you go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, no, she actually had this since 2001. So she held it and kept it to herself for all those years. And then in 2017, when there was a different world around her that she couldn't control, and then comes back in a wheelchair, and that's when I'm like, Grandma, what are you saying in that? And she's looking at me, and I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go to the doctor with you on Monday, because this is not you. And that was the moment of me understanding how, like, oh, shit, the house you bought to give you a new world and get away from the 10-year world that you were just, like, stuck in, you felt, and that actually was actually keeping your mind more locked in.
Intact.
Until the split.
And so let's talk about the exploration in art, like the nexus here of understanding, you're witnessing, what I'm hearing is witnessing, and then I'm hearing a scientist talk about some of the elements of what's happening physically. So let's marry those two with how then you evolve it into an artistic expression.
I guess the healing moment for me about, again, trying to go back to tools and stay in, like, this was an ill learning experience for me, because all I lived is in art. And, like, gang member that dealt with Shakespeare the whole time in his life, and, like, was privileged enough to go to, like, privileged colleges and shit to just have fun as an artist, because my grandmother facilitated that for me, right? So then it was this moment of me seeing, like, oh shit, I learned so much in all this art shit that I was able to share with you in the house and play out characters that you would be like, Jose, and I know Jose been there for fucking 20 years, but I'm gonna play out Jose for those 5 minutes for you, because I know Jose used to talk like this, mommy. Jose, doña, cállese, and play out Jose for her, and it would be like, oh, for those 30 minutes that she will come back, I'll get to be me. But when she's other people, I could get to play those characters and use my skills that art taught me, that she facilitated for me to have, right? And then the next step for me was like, now how do I give this to people before I even give people my art? How do I give them the tools that is affordable from a 99-cent store? You could go get a coloring book and a pack of crayons, sit with your moms, and just be like, yo, let's color some shit. Yo, tell me a story about DR. And, like, start building so it's not something that you have to unearth after, right? So I'm trying to create that tool that stop being reactive and more proactive, so when the shit does happen, you already have a toolkit. So more of that. And figuring that out through the arts. Like, exhibition. Look at her story, so you don't feel like you're in a weird wake or some weird shit like that. Like, look at her art. Like, she literally collected art. Look at this story of this woman that literally took care of so many people in the journey of America, because we're all migrants. Look at the migrant story, and for a moment it would have been forgotten. You are all carrying it with you now. It's not forgotten.
So, but Dr. Nikki, let's talk about the grounding, right? Like, he's describing two things. One, what is happening to someone he loves, and then what the caretaker can do about it, or the people who are surrounding them. I mean, what's the reality of that from a scientific perspective? I mean, can you create that connection in that way that we're talking about?
I think you can, and I've got a new project that's starting soon with one of my PhD students who actually came from a theatre background and then did a master's in psychology at King's College London. And we're looking at this whole idea that memories move. For example, I mean, in the case of Flacco's grandmother, it's not, the emphasis is not on trauma, but there are many people that suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and you can help them enormously with those stress-induced memories by capitalizing on the fact that memories move and that you can therefore change the perspective of the memory of what they thought happened. And we're very interested in looking at the sort of architectural structure of storytelling and how it fits in with this whole idea of memory and imagining the future. Because stories are all about mental time travel, whether they're fiction stories where it might be contemporary dance conceptualizing an idea that the brain has difficulty thinking about. For example, Mark Baldwin and I choreographed a piece called Strange Charm of Mother Nature, which was, all about particle physics. And another one, Comedy of Change, that was all about the biology of evolution and the contributions of Charles Darwin. So, I think art very often is an excellent way of conceptualizing and providing emotional layers and experiences. I can describe a patient and say, well, Oliver Sacks discusses in his book The Case of Jimmy G, the lost mariner, and how he looked in the mirror and he was 59, but in his mind he thought he was 19 and is completely shocked when he sees the image of his face in the mirror, and then luckily he forgets it again soon thereafter and everything is back to normal. But what art gives you is these rich layers of emotional experiences and flavours and tastes and smells that bring these things to life and really show how these things profoundly change the way a person sees, the way a person feels, the way a person remembers, the way a person thinks. And so that's why I think that intersection between the two is so powerful.
So to go off that, we have this deep fake that we created, like an old picture of my father at 15 years old. And we have letters from him that he wrote. So we actually created a memory like that. Like, hey, look at this picture of the old, and there are people coming to the gallery being like, oh shit, I have that. I can create this memory of like my father asking for things and like laugh for him. We're like, you remember when we were there in that time period? And like I'm like, yeah, tap in. Because now it's no longer dark. I'm making some joy with a picture and letters that you find and all this archival stuff, and go home and create your own gallery now with your family. Because you have all the same shit. I had it in my grandmother's house. So that little moment is like where I'm geeking out at, where I'm like, I'm just gonna go and tell my aunt, yo, remember this letter you read when you were 17? Read it again, now at 30. I'm gonna put it to that picture you sent mama. And I'm gonna have people being able to see that moment of like what it was in 1983 when you were struggling, but you're not no more. So through that moment, showing these people they can also do the same thing and build off that. And everybody loves QR codes, so here's a QR code or something. Scan.
Forgive me, but we do have a video, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So
Video
before
time.
we go to the video, can you tell us why did you think about virtual reality or 3D storytelling as opposed to 2D or flatties, as some may refer to them, or pictures, or an exhibit, or
I like failing
et cetera,
forward.
et cetera?
I like failing forward, and first I started with what I know, which is like, let me create something where people could come in and experience, and then that was a big, massive money fail. Because it was like, you created some shit where you didn't even find out if the people could make it, because they're actually home taking care of people and this and that. And then after doing that type of research, it was like, oh, you could get them if you're going to do field trips from a senior center to the workshops live, and then bus them back and feed them and do all that type of care. But then what happened to the person that's literally emailing you saying, I want to go, but I can't? That was actually what happened during our first trial in Bushwick. So we're like, okay, send them the video, send them this, send them that. But we need to create we need, like, how do we feed them? Because they need something, because they can't even leave.
Caretakers.
Yeah, the caretaker can't leave. They have to be there 24/7. And probably during that moment of sleep, they can go outside and get the milk and the juice. So during that moment that they can actually have a moment for themselves to like enjoy something or create something? How can we give them a story? Like, look, you're not the only one. Look at this beautiful story that also gives you these tools for you to play at home. So it's, for me, it's, I don't know how to make VR, but I know these people do. So
I know a few
I know how to
people.
write stories. So we're gonna fail forward and see if we can create something for caregivers.
Okay, Ryan, can we check out that video?
This is a glimpse of what the healing room looks like in VR. You are opening the door now. He is opening the door now. She is opening the door now.
Right there.
We are opening the door now. They are opening the door now. Closed. I'm closing the door now. You are closing the door now. He is closing the door now. She's closing the door now. We are closing the door now. They are closing the door now. I am reading the newspaper, writing the verbs, spelling English words, studying English.
So tell us a little bit more about what we just witnessed.
I'm also trying to respect that she left everything behind. She left her story, so I should let her words tell it. And that's an example of that. Like, that's her own writing, trying to learn the verbs in English. So how do I let her tell her own story? Because you also go through the, oh, so you think I'm helping her with the door, or you think she's still trying to make the door open or struggling. So just layering her own words to tell the story of dementia. When she was learning a whole new language and probably forgetting another one. So this moment of just letting the story be told by the facts, and me just having fun learning my grandmother's life, because as a migrant, you usually keep things away from your people because you don't want them to be hurt while you're struggling, and the resilience and all this extra. So for me, it's like, let's do the project that can activate not having to even be resilient. Like, you can be normal. If they pass those tools down, we don't need to be resilient because they gave us the tools to begin normalcy. So for me, it's like, if I'm able to create a project that can go into spaces of a gallery where people could go, in a community where it's Henry Street settlement, 100 years in the community providing already health. So that's a building that can get a gallery because people already engage it and do that type of, so engage the art spaces for what they do to address the problem in that zone. So it's, I'm just trying to have fun with a new medium, really, and like celebrate the story that is not going to be forgotten.
And Nikki, when you watch something like that, what goes through your mind?
Well, it's very poetic, for sure. No, it is. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I think the thing is, the imagery is very simple. And that is meant to be a massive compliment, not an insult. It's the simple but not naive, right? When you just cut to the chase and find a really powerful analogy, like the doors, and then the words and the idea of perhaps forgetting one language that was so much about words, to learning a new language, which is how to try to compensate as best as you can for this loss of movement in both the mind, because memories move as well as bodies. So it's you know, using those analogies and those powerful metaphors in a simple and very elegant way to trigger the audience's reaction to these debilitating diseases and try to see it in more of a positive light than rather than just going, oh, isn't this terrible, right?
I'm trying to, thing that I always tell, shout out to the team, shout out to the squad, Cricket, Kevin, Stephanie, OJ Group Squad. We're not trying to break people, we're trying to crack. That's it. I'm not trying to break anybody because then you won't be able to engage me. So I'm trying to crack from the norm that you usually have. Because if you're dealing with some shit that I created, I'm always trying to create some shit that I have not seen. So come and play, let's play, and I'm gonna try to crack you. So then we can engage into an uncomfortable section or talk about something and see if we can come up with an understanding to something. Not trying to find the answers. If we don't, we don't. But if I crack you, I think we can have a conversation, because then we're both in an uneven zone.
So let's back up a little bit, because I'm just curious about what was the inspiration for each of you for the work that you're doing now? I think we talked about this briefly before, which is to say, we often think about evolutions as a linear line, right? And around even creativity, but particularly in science, right? That it's a very deductive straight line. But talk to us about what ignited, what lit the fire for you to move in the direction that each of you have taken.
Well, I think one of the things that's so special about mental time travel is that it isn't a straight line. If you think about the stories we tell ourselves of what has happened to us over the years,
I meant it more personally to you as a human being.
Yeah, I'm coming on to that.
Okay, good.
That
She got you.
it's subjective, but you can go back to a time in early life as quickly as you can go back to a time that happened a few moments ago. And the whole idea for me is that mental time travel is more like a figure of 8 kind of shape than a line, because the past, the present and the future all become one. What is now the future will soon become the present and then the past. But with all this flip-flopping, when you think about the past, you often use it to think about the future, which is why Lewis Carroll was so correct in saying it's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards, because our memories evolve for the future. And I think I found that subjectively in me a very powerful message that would then inspire my science and my art. My science in terms of thinking about what kinds of tests I could do on the crows and jays to show aspects of remembering the past and imagining the future, and also how it inspired the choreography that I was doing on contemporary dance with Mark Baldwin, on how we could convey through movement these wordless thoughts.
But when you were 10 years old, you didn't know anything about any of these things.
I didn't know anything about mental time travel then.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, but what was the first step? I mean,
The
I heard
birds.
stories about you in miniskirts and dancing. Yeah, the
The
miniskirt
miniskirt
stories.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a dancer. If you've got it, flaunt it.
Everybody go see The Guardian, Nikki Clayton and The Guardian. Google that. You're going to see legs, tango, and birds. You heard? Bird song.
But no, it was birds. I wanted to be a bird. I wanted to move like a bird and think like a bird. And realised that actually, so when I applied to university, I applied to the University of Oxford, and I wanted to do a joint degree in psychology and biology. And Oxford doesn't do that. So I had the choice that either I could read zoology or psychology with philosophy. And I was very intrigued by both, and wasn't sure which one to do. And at interview, one of the men interviewing me, who then became my mentor and very close friend, Lord John Krebs of Whiteham, said, well, if you choose...
She just name drop, niggas. Respect that. Just take it in. She said, Lord, nigga, respect it.
He's pretty damn... He's pretty damn cool. But he said to me...
I know y'all ain't get it. Y'all was like quiet. She ain't do that for nothing. Like, come on, man.
Well, you haven't even got me talking about Sir David Attenborough yet now, have you?
Oh.
But John said to me, well, if you choose zoology, you can do a bird behaviour research project. And so I was like, right, I'm doing zoology then.
He said, sign me up. All right, but, you know, Flacco, tell us a little bit about, I heard gangster, Bennington, which don't seem to really go together very well.
Yo, Bennington was dope, bro. They let me do whatever the fuck I wanted. So it's like that, right? It was like, I want to go and study theater and DJ at night, because that's what I used to do in Bushwick. So I'm going to just tell them what they knew me from adapting Shakespeare, because as a kid, I'm like, Shakespeare do mad novelas. My people love novelas. Let's go. 1 and 1. But with me, it was like always embracing the unknown, right? So it's like I'm creating a play that deals with the brain. So there's a moment there that I got to go into an unknown that is all the science of all that shit. So I'm going to have some fun with all of that. Like right now, I'm geeking out about that. There's one bird from the Dominican Republic that as soon as it leaves the Dominican Republic, it dies. But there's also 17 other birds that actually migrate to other places. And today I found out that birds shed their leaves. I didn't know that shit. That's like snakes. So I'm literally geeking out right now with all the new science.
And that has to do with this installation that you're working on,
right?
Yeah.
So at
Mercedes.
Abrams Art Center right now, if anybody has time, you can go to Abrams Art Center. It's open till 9 p.m. There is a gallery installation about Mercedes by her words. So the story of Mercedes by her. So you can go and take that journey. And then there's another room that has a lot of arts and craft materials with prompts that you can do to let something out, right? So you don't got to carry that story with you after you leave. You can start documenting your story and your people's stories. So that is at Abrams Art Center, and we're trying to figure out how do we put that in a VR, right? So that's what you saw the beginning glimpse of. And then when we finish that, you get what people are used to, a fourth wall and a plate, you know? The work. I'm just being real. I've done that shit. So I got to challenge myself and be in an unknown that is a room full of people that know how to talk about. I learned about that there's mocap. Know what I'm saying? It took me 3 months to figure that shit out.
Now you got to tell people what it is, because some people might not know.
I'm not you explain. That's you.
For motion capture.
¿Tú me entiendes? That's you.
I know, but you're learning what that is, so tell them what you've learned.
Shout out to Kerr. With an intern Kerr showing me that G shit that I ain't be knowing. Got to shout her out. She the one out here passing them tools down already as an intern. Love interns. Just got to shout her out. You know how it be.
Yeah, no, it's good, but what is motion capture? Tell them.
I'm just trying to make sure that I could do some crazy shit and like do a dance with a poem and figure out how that motion capture then looks on camera, and then me make a choice if I want to keep it.
Right?
¿Qué sé yo? They're gonna do that.
Right.
That's the part that I'm like, I just want to have fun. I know that this is gonna do something, and then I'm gonna watch what that did. But I still did what I failing forward, figuring out a dance with a wheelchair, a cane, and a walker, in this space, and figuring out what these cameras do after in 3D. And I just want to see what that is, and if that can be a dance that then I can go write a song to, that then can be in the play. But it's in the VR. It's a beautiful piece, right? So it's the layering for me that is like that geeking out moment where like, can I actually make this happen where all through I'm being able to complement all the other layers that are the Mercedes project? And can I get a cool team of dope-ass collaborators to like help me in that? Because I don't know what fully motion capture. See how I'm trying to like go back? Like, I don't really know what that shit is. They just told me this is what it is.
So what are you learning from each other?
A lot about birds, a lot about migration, a lot about just cool people, right? Like a lot about like, I think I'm gonna go next year to London for a month and like go and geek out and like, and bring a wheelchair, a cane, and all these things and be like, Nikki, you ready to talk about birds and dancing? I'm gonna be here for a month. Here's some chicken, let's play. Right? Because I ain't got pheasant money in London, let's keep it 100. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have chicken there.
And Nikki, what would you say?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about the exchange of ideas. But for those exchanges to be effective, you've got to have a chemistry. You've got to connect.
And we connect.
And we connect.
That's the home right here.
Yeah.
That's the
I'll be
home
teaching him tango next.
Listen.
Maybe we'll do a bit of bachata later.
That's the Dominican music, just so y'all know. She just dropped bars. Bars. She ain't say some other, she said tango because that's what she fuck with, and then she was like, I'm going to give him his, bachata.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
we need
can
a
dance
podcast.
both.
We need a podcast.
We do. But it's about listening carefully to one another and playing with one another. You know, the discussions we're having, as you can see here tonight, are very playful. I mean, there's a serious element to them, of course, but that playfulness and that connectivity or chemistry and the ability to use language in such a way that we can both connect with it, bringing our different perspectives.
So would you say that art expands science, or does science constrain art? Or what is that interplay, and how would you describe what it is at this period in both of your
Well, it can do
practices?
both. So if it's done badly, then science constrains art in an annoying way that isn't helpful to either the scientist or the artist. But if it's done well, then it expands it by allowing you to see the same idea from multiple different perspectives, right?
So for example, right, my grandmother, really Catholic heavy, and I know that I could go with the cop out and use a dove and shit, like, but now I'm like fucking with the right scientist that's like, I'm gonna send you some bird shit, right? And that already activated me because I like that type of swag that I'm like, I'm gonna Google some shit before you send me some shit. So then I'm already, by the time that we're meeting again, I'm like, I just found out there's 17 birds that do this, 36 birds that do this, there was human intervention for these birds, and there's only one bird that dies. Right? So I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Right? That's the good collaboration.
Yeah.
Right? That is not, oh wait, but you're talking about the wrong birds and I don't want to fuck with you.
So does it all boil down to just plain curiosity?
Curiosity is a big part of it, but so is creativity, right? You have to put those things together. Curiosity is important because you have to want to explore ideas, but then you need to know what to do with those ideas. You know, there's the famous Picasso quote, isn't there, that creativity is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do, and that's also where the playfulness comes in.
So I had this string all over my house, this red string, that I would test the strength of that string. I would put pliers, silverware, sometimes notebooks, just to test it. And then that string ended up being in one of my first shows, because it just taught me like the level of how I can test.
And we know you like red.
Actually, I started falling. See, this is what goes back into the gang shit. No, I actually didn't like red because red meant that I was gonna get in trouble, like fight if I wore it. So as an adult, is when I'm like, oh, I can wear red, man. Come on, stop.
So back to the red string, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. We could go there. I like shit like that. Tangents are beautiful. So with me, it was like, with this string and testing this pressure and testing all these things, and how is that gonna carry? Oh wait, nah, okay, now I'm gonna add that into something because I'm gonna now talk to people about how this red string was actually me testing my limits. And then I'm gonna add you, because I'm a poet, I'm gonna be like, I did that at the age of 9. So at 7, my first memory was this. At 8, it was this. At 9, it was that string. So what are your memories and what is your list poem that never ends until you die? Because every year you should add a new line. You should create every year. Every year you should do something for yourself that has no capital or nothing crazy attached, just to let your imagination go bonkers, right? So like, what is your list poem and what is your challenge to yourself that has shit to do with none of this capital, none of this crazy, none of this. Just like for you, how are you keeping your shit alive? Because the one thing I want to say about like doing all these things, what I realized, this is the only room that didn't bring up the word trauma like that heavy. But everywhere else, I've been having to tell everybody, like, yo, stop. That's not here. That doesn't live here. Grandma never passed that down and didn't want me to have that. We had those discussions. So I know what I'm doing and building for people that doesn't have newspaper person. You can't say trauma to that because that's not what it was. You're projecting your issues into this store. Did you have somebody that had issues with dementia? And then I crack them, and then they start crying. And then we have an hour conversation, and they go write a beautiful paper or a beautiful newspaper article, like blah, blah, blah. Today was all day of that, where I got to remind people that it does not have to be traumatizing, right? From the nice, beautiful struggle of taking care of yours, it goes into healing and celebrating. So use old stuff that they left behind to celebrate, not to remind you of the gone. There's tools in all of that. And that's really the tap in, right? That is like, as artists, we're able to tap in and be like, there's something here that I don't know what it is, but let me take some time, let me think about it. And like, oh, she left all these things. And there's something here. Oh, look at these letters that actually supported all these people and blah, 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 blah. And then a story comes.
How long did it take you? What was the journey of realizing that you wanted to create something?
For her or for me?
No, I mean, I think wanting to create something for the community.
After I realized that, again, goes back to the pandemic, when I saw that man nigga sending out those fake templates that they care about everybody in their emails, I stand with Black Lives Matter and all this shit. And like, right after the pandemic happened, everybody was like bullshitting themselves. All institutions were. $1 million ones and broke ones. And a lot of they were playing games with people's lives. And I was like, I'm not an artist for that. So now I'm just gonna reallocate your funding. Every time you ask me to dance, I'm gonna tell you, you need to add double that because I need to do some work if you wanna have my skin. Because really, that's at the end of the day, that's what it is. My skin is in Max Machina because of this, right? So Max Machina is failing forward with me and giving me the proper tools for us to collaborate and be able to fail forward creating tools for people. So it's like, that's the only companies I collaborate with. I'm gonna have Vallejo call me up and be like, yo, shit crazy, let's walk. Let's go over here, let's eat this, let's talk about this. And I'm like, I fuck with that energy. You ain't even send me an email, nigga. You're like, yo, I'm gonna send you a dude. Y'all gonna talk, go. I'm like, yeah. Like it's the beauty of that.
You're trying to jump in here,
Oh, sorry,
Dr.
I
Nikki.
just don't.
No,
I
I
wanna be
was
able to
just.
see
I
Yeah.
know.
From the beginning, I said, why am I in the middle? I can't see them both. That was my first 10 minutes up here, just like, coño.
You look like there was something you wanted to say when he was just describing, obviously, the pandemic for so many people for so many reasons, and many of us probably haven't truly internalized, the experience and the aftermath, right? But you've mentioned it several times. It's something that's really impacted your practice and your life. And as he was describing that in terms of choices that he would make now, relative to his creative practice and the people he wants to work with. I mean, you were shaking your head, and I was just wondering what part of it that you were really resonating.
I was just thinking that as Flacco, you were explaining your work, I was thinking what a beautiful example of mental time travel in action it was, because you're describing how you were feeling before the pandemic and what you had done in the past, right back to the red strings when you were 9, and then at the same time, almost in the same breath, moving forward to what you want to do with it next, based on where you are in the moment. And just thinking that, the way in which we discuss these things brings it so much more to life. In a standard psychology class, you would hear the definition of mental time travel, subjectively travelling back to the past and into the future. You might get a standard case study, probably the most famous one is Henry Molaison, who was known as HM during his life. But it's when you describe this rich tapestry of the mental and physical processes that make up this thing, these body memories, these mind memories, these ways in which things can suddenly change and suddenly the door can open. You know, you've got a glimpse of conscious awareness back, maybe only meant for a glimpse. It really brings the whole thing into perspective, and also showing that with these really rich themes such as this, you can take it so much further. I mean, I think for what you and I are doing together and what you want to do, I feel like the door is only just opened.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a whole future ahead of us of things that, you know, we'd like to do together. Some of them are just not verbalized yet. You know, it's just a feeling, just an intuition, if you like.
See, that's the type of artwork. I can't wait, bro. It's just drippy. It's exciting as hell, bro. Like, come on. I'm going to think about mad, weird-ass science questions, and I could just be, like, not feeling any type of way, but just be like, yo, Nikki, I'm going to email you. Get ready. Get ready, because they're going to be crazy. And it's that, to find collaborators like that, it's hard, especially when people just want to be able to say, oh, I'm working with you. So it's beautiful when somebody's able to connect you to somebody to just be open to fail.
And also so much better meeting in person.
Oh, fuck yeah, fuck Zoom
You know,
World.
until today, it was all done on Zoom. Well, you know, I'm grateful to Zoom because it allowed us to have contact in times when we couldn't have had contact. And I'm also fed up with Zoom. You know, it's not like...
that's that European cursing. Y'all peeped that, right? There was such a humbleness to it, too. Just, ooh,
You know what I mean?
qué lindo.
That, you know, the conversations you can have in person are just so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'd all agree, hence the reason why we're physically sitting here amongst one another.
Yeah.
Last question, and I know you're going to stick around for a little while, so that if folks have questions or thoughts, feedback, I'm sure both of you would love that. But if a genie jumped out of a bottle and you could have one wish, what would it be?
I'd like to know how to talk COVID. I'd like to be able to really get inside the head of a jay or a raven. Saw a pair of blue jays today in Central Park. Very excited. But I'd really, you know, or if there was some really clever way of figuring out whether it would be possible to think beyond words rather than just with and without them. So you said I could only have one. I've been a little bit cheeky. I've given you two.
Fucking bars, bro.
I like that. Can you think without words?
Oh.
What do you guys think about that one? I don't think I would have ever asked myself that. What do you think? What do you got?
I want to be plants. I want to be all the plants in the world. Like, I'm always photographing the plants. I love the fucking one that looks like a bird. I don't remember the name right now. Smoked a blunt before this fucking sit down.
We keep it real here. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I know.
Keeping it real.
There's no.
We're
I'm
amongst
not.
friends.
Ain't nobody editing for nobody, bro. Come on now. We gotta be real.
What
If
do you
not,
want? The genie's right there.
Bird, like not birds. Flowers, bro. I want to be all type of flowers and like all type of grass and all type of everything. Like I just want to be able to be trees. Just stay in the motherfucking field. I want to be able to see all of that and like be all of that. And like, what does the wind do to it? And why does it chase the sun? And I know why, but like to be able to like choose to be bent for your whole, you know, and like all that shit, I want to be able to like just be that and experience that. Bird songs, baby. Let some birds lawn at me and shit and be like, what up, little nigga? You good?
All right. I think we're going to wrap it out right there. I want to thank you, Dr. Nikki, and I want to thank you, Flacco. Many good thoughts were shared today. Thank you both.
Oh, Lord.
Turn these off.
Bird songs, let's go.
Bird
Blast
song.
that shit, bro.
Bird song. You know I'm birding, baby. Bird song. Where my binoculars at? Bird song. I'm with the trees. Bird song. I'm looking for birds, yo. Bird song.